Adimp, you will regret feeding that hungry man the day he becomes successful." Her sister said it like a curse. But Adimp only laughed as she stirred her pot of hot Wadu soup, the steam rising into her small room like hope. The man she was feeding wasn't her husband. He wasn't even her boyfriend. He was just a broke tailor's apprentice. A man with no place to sleep. No money for food. No fabric to sew his own clothes. But Adimp believed in something bigger than money. She believed love was enough. She believed loyalty mattered more than looks. She believed the man sleeping on her floor would never forget her sacrifices. She was wrong. Because 1 year later, when his fashion house appeared in Vogue, and his face was plastered on billboards across Victoria Island, he stood in front of flashing cameras with a different woman on his arm. A woman who was lighter-skinned, model-thin, Instagram famous. And when reporters asked him about his journey, about who helped him when he had nothing, he didn't mention Adimp's name. Not even once. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. We post new African stories every week, and your support helps us keep bringing you these deeply emotional and powerful narratives. Now, back to the story. Adimp was born heavy. Not just in body, but in spirit. She was the kind of woman who carried people's burdens without being asked. Her mother used to say Adimp came into the world with her grandmother's soul. Patient, giving, always offering the last piece of EBA on her plate even when she was hungry too. Growing up in Mushin, Lagos, Adimp learned early that her body would always be a topic. Aunties at the market pinched her arms and laughed. "Aha! This girl is growing like akara in hot oil." Cousins whispered when she reached for second helpings. Boys at church looked past her, eyes chasing slimmer girls in fitted dresses. And Adimp learned something painful. If she couldn't be desired, then she would be useful. If nobody would choose her, then at least people would need her. She worked at her aunt's fabric shop in Balagan Market, surrounded by Ankara, lace, and damask, materials that carried the stories of weddings, naming ceremonies, and Sunday Thanksgiving. Adimp knew every pattern by heart. But more than that, she understood people. She knew which customer needed gentle persuasion, which one needed space, and which one came to the market not for fabric, but for someone to talk to. Adimp was 28, and still unmarried. Her mother had stopped asking why. But her younger sister, Fadik, slim, sharp-tongued, married with 2 children, never stopped reminding her. "Bimp, if you just tried small, lose weight, maybe men will look your way." But Adimp had stopped shrinking herself emotionally long ago. If her body took up space, so be it. She would fill that space with kindness instead of apologies. Then one rainy Tuesday in August, everything changed. The sky opened suddenly, the kind of Lagos rain that floods streets within minutes and sends everyone running for shelter. Adimp was locking up her shop when she saw him. A young man drenched to the bone, shivering, holding a thin plastic bag over his head like it could save him. He stumbled toward her shop entrance, water streaming from his clothes. "Please, sister," he gasped. "Just let me stand here small." His voice was hoarse. His eyes were sunken. His clothes were faded and patched, hanging loosely on his thin frame like rags. Adimp didn't hesitate. "Come inside," she said, pulling back the tarpaulin. "You'll catch cold." His name was Tund. "Tund Adeyemi," he said quietly. He was a tailor's apprentice under a master in Yoba, a man who barely paid him, forced him to sleep on the workshop floor, and beat him whenever he made mistakes. Tund was only 26, but hunger and disappointment had aged him. As they waited for the rain to calm down, Tund started talking. About his dream of owning a fashion house. About the designs he sketched in secret. About how he came to Lagos from Ibadan 3 years ago with nothing. Chasing a future that kept slipping away. And Adimp listened. Not the way people pretend to listen. She listened like his dreams mattered. When the rain finally slowed, Adimp did something that would change both their lives forever. She looked at him and said simply, Come and eat. Tund came for dinner that night. Then the next night. Then the next. Adimp lived alone in a single room in Mushin. Nothing fancy. Just a bed, a stove, a small wardrobe, and a cracked mirror. But what she lacked in space, she made up for in warmth. She cooked for Tund like he was family. Jollof rice. EBA and okro. Moin moin wrapped in leaves. Dodo and fried fish. And slowly, the hungry man began to look like a man with hope again. He ate like a man who had forgotten what it meant to be full. Sometimes he didn't even speak while eating, just chewing fast, eyes fixed on the plate like the food might disappear if he blinked. One evening, after finishing a second helping, he leaned back and exhaled like someone returning to life. "You cook like my mother used to," he said softly, his eyes glistening. Adimp smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "Then honor her," she teased gently, "by not wasting it." Slowly, Tund began to open up, not just about hunger, but about his real dreams. One night, he pulled out a worn brown envelope and carefully unfolded papers from inside. Sketches. Not ordinary sketches. They were bold, innovative, alive. Traditional Yoruba patterns fused with modern cuts, designs that looked like something meant for runways, not a cramped tailor workshop in Yaba. Agbada reimagined with sharp, asymmetrical hems. Buba and Iro that dripped with avant-garde details, structured like sculpture, daring like rebellion. Adimp stared at them like she was looking at treasure. "These are beautiful," she whispered, tracing the lines with her fingers. Tund's face tightened. "They'll never happen," he said bitterly. "I don't have money for fabric. My master won't let me work on personal projects. I'm nobody." Adimp looked at him for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would cost her more than money. It would cost her peace. "What if I helped you?" she asked quietly. Tund blinked. "Help me how?" Adimp swallowed, then spoke faster, like if she didn't say it now, she might lose courage. "I have access to fabric offcuts, remnants, damaged pieces customers won't buy. I can get them cheap, or even free, if I ask my aunt." She pointed at the sketches. "You have the skill. I have the materials. We can start something." Tund stared at her like she had just offered him a new life. "Why would you do that for me?" he asked. Adimp shrugged, suddenly shy. "Because I believe in you," she said. "And because dreams shouldn't die just because nobody else can see them yet." That night, sitting on her floor with fabric scraps spread around them like a rainbow, they became partners. Not lovers. Not yet. But something deeper. Two people who saw possibility where the world saw failure. Tund worked deep into the night, cutting, stitching, creating. Adimp brought him food, encouraged him when he doubted, and prayed over his hands before he touched the needle. 3 months later, Tund completed his first collection. 5 stunning pieces. Clothes that looked like tradition had learned how to speak the language of the future. Adimp used her savings to rent a small space at a weekend market in Lekki. She stood beside Tund's makeshift display, her heart pounding as wealthy Lagosians walked past, glancing, pausing, sometimes stopping. Then an elegant woman approached. Perfumed, polished, gold on her wrists, gold on her neck, gold in her voice. She picked up one piece, examined the stitching, and asked, "Who made this?" Tund stepped forward, his voice shaking. "I did, Ma." The woman nodded slowly. Then she bought 3 pieces. And before she left, she smiled and said, "My friends will love this." That was the beginning. Within 6 months, Tund's designs were being requested by people with real money. Bankers' wives. Society women. Young professionals who wanted something unique. Adimp convinced her aunt to let Tund use a corner of their market shop during weekdays. She marketed him to every customer who walked in. She took pictures of his work on her phone and posted them everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp groups. Adimp became his manager, his marketer, his financier, and his cook, all without asking for anything in return. Tund moved out of his master's workshop and into a small room near Adimp's place. They saw each other daily. He started calling her, "my queen." He held her hand as they walked through Balagan Market. He kissed her forehead whenever she brought him midnight meals. "I couldn't do this without you," he whispered one night, exhausted but happy. "We're doing it together," Adimp replied, smiling. But even as she said it, something was shifting. As Tund's success grew, so did his time online. He began studying fashion influencers on Instagram, women with cinched waists, perfect makeup, designer handbags, and bodies shaped like hourglasses. Women who looked like the kind of people success was made for. He followed them, liked their pictures, studied their poses, their aesthetics, their lifestyles. One evening, Adimp brought him fried rice and chicken. She had spent her lunch money on it, just to make him happy. Tund barely looked up from his phone. "You know," he said casually, "I'm trying to eat healthier now." Adimp paused. "All this oily food." The words hit her like a slap. "Since when?" she asked quietly. Tund finally looked up. "Since I realized I need to look the part if I want to be taken seriously in this industry." Adimp's throat tightened. She set the food down gently and walked away. That night, she ate alone. And she kept telling herself the same lie again and again. He's just stressed. Success is new. Pressure is high. He didn't mean it. But the comments didn't stop. They only changed shape. "Do you ever exercise? My ex used to watch her weight. You know appearance matters in fashion, right?" And each sentence was like a small cut. Until Adimp started bleeding confidence without even noticing. "If you dressed better, maybe people would take us more seriously as a brand." Each word was a small cut. And Adimp, who had spent her whole life learning how to swallow pain, keep peace, and smile through discomfort, said nothing. She just nodded, like she didn't feel it. But she did. Tund's big break. Tund's big break came through a fashion blogger named Zainab Sap. Light-skinned. Impossibly thin. Perfect makeup. 200,000 Instagram followers. Brand deals with international companies. She stumbled on Tund's work online and sent a message that changed everything. "I love your designs. Very Yoruba, very chic. We should collaborate." Tund nearly lost his mind from excitement. "Adimp, do you know what this means?" he shouted, pacing their tiny room. "If Zainab wears my work, I'll blow up." Adimp smiled through the tightness in her chest. "That's wonderful, Tund," she said softly, even though something in her spirit didn't feel settled. The collaboration that opened doors and closed hearts. The collaboration happened fast. Zainab wore Tund's designs to events. She posted pictures. Her followers went wild. And just like that, orders exploded. Suddenly, Tund had more work than he could handle. He hired 2 assistants, rented a proper workshop, started attending fashion events. The kind of places where Adimp felt like she didn't belong. Victoria Island. One Friday, Tund stood in front of their mirror, adjusting a new designer shirt like a man already practicing his new life. "Come with me tonight," he said. "There's a showcase in Victoria Island." Adimp hesitated. "I don't have anything to wear to those kinds of places." Tund shrugged. "Just wear something nice. It'll be fine." But it wasn't fine. The venue was filled with people who looked like they stepped out of magazines. Thin, polished, perfumed, dripping in designer everything. Adimp wore her best Ankara dress, but the moment she walked in, she felt huge. Not because she had grown bigger, but because everyone else had shrunk the room with their judgment. She stood beside Tund like a shadow. And when he introduced her, his voice was light, almost embarrassed. "This is Adimp," he said quickly. She helps with logistics. Logistics. Not the woman who fed me when I was starving. Not the woman who believed in me when I had nothing. Not the woman who built this dream with her hands. Just logistics. Zainab arrives. Then Zainab appeared, smiling, glowing, smelling like expensive perfume and expensive confidence. She kissed Tund on both cheeks, and lingered just a little too long. Tund, darling, she purred. Everyone is talking about your pieces. Then she glanced at a dimp like she was glancing at a chair. Oh, hi. That was it. Just hi. Later, a dimp overheard two women whispering near the restroom. Did you see Tund's friend? The big one. Yeah. I'm surprised he brought her here. Maybe she's his sister. Doesn't matter. He won't keep her around long. Not if he wants to stay relevant. A dimp walked into the bathroom stall and locked the door. And she cried silently. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears slipping down her cheeks like a quiet funeral for her dignity. This is it, Bimp. When they got home that night, Tund was buzzing like electricity. Did you see how many people wanted my card? He said excitedly. This is it, Bimp. This is what we've been working for. A dimp's voice came out small. Yes, we. Tund kissed her forehead distractedly. I couldn't have done it without your support. Support. Not partnership. Not love. Support. The launch of ADICO. 6 months after the Zainab collaboration, Tund opened his own fashion house in Lekki, ADICO. The launch party was everywhere, covered by blogs, attended by celebrities, sponsored by brands. Tund wore a custom suit. Zainab wore one of his gowns and stood beside him in every photo like she owned his success. A dimp was there too, but only because she showed up uninvited. When Tund saw her, he looked shocked. Bimp. You came. A dimp smiled, trying not to shake. Of course I came. This is our dream. Tund's smile faltered. Right, our dream. But his eyes were already scanning the room, searching for more important people. The final blow. 2 weeks later, a dimp visited Tund's new studio with a pot of his favorite egusi soup. She had taken the day off work to cook it fresh. She walked in smiling. And froze. Tund and Zainab were laughing, their heads close together over a design table. Too close. When they saw her, they pulled apart quickly. Tund stood up. Bimp. What are you doing here? I brought you food, a dimp said, holding up the pot. Tund sighed like she was embarrassing him. I thought I told you I'm trying to eat cleaner now. All this heavy soup and swallow. It's not good for my image. A dimp blinked. Your image. Zainab smiled thinly. Tund and I were just going over the strategy for Paris Fashion Week, she said. We're positioning the brand globally. Paris Fashion Week. A dimp set the pot down slowly. I'll go, she whispered. Wait, Tund called after her. But not to apologize. He said, can you return those fabric samples to your aunt's shop? I don't need them anymore. I'm sourcing internationally now. Something inside a dimp shattered. She walked out without answering. We need to talk. That night, Tund texted her. We need to talk. They met at a cafe in Ikeja. Tund arrived late, distracted, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even pretend to be nervous. Listen, a dimp, he began, not looking her in the eyes. You've been amazing. Truly. I'll always be grateful for everything you did for me. A dimp's hands trembled slightly. But things are different now. Different how? She asked. Tund sighed like she was making it hard. I'm moving in a different direction. Zainab and I are building something together. She understands the industry. She has connections. A dimp's voice cracked. And I don't. Tund leaned back and finally said the truth he had been swallowing for months. Bimp. You're a beautiful person inside. But look at yourself. Look at the world. Adimp swallowed hard. I'm not. I need someone who looks the part, Tund continued. Someone who photographs well. Someone who fits the brand. Someone who. He couldn't say it. But Adimp did. Someone who isn't fat. Tund didn't deny it. I gave you everything, Adimp whispered. My money. My time. My connections. My prayers. I believed in you when no one else did. Tund nodded like he was listening. But his heart was already gone. And I'm grateful, he said. But gratitude isn't love. Then he added, cold and final. Honestly, Bimp. I was never in love with you. Adimp's eyes widened. You were convenient. Convenient. Like a tool. Like fabric scraps. Like something to use and throw away. The disappearing. For 3 weeks, Adimp disappeared. She called in sick. Ignored calls. Stayed in her room with the curtains drawn. She replayed everything. Every meal. Every prayer. Every sacrifice. She opened Instagram and saw them everywhere. Tund and Zainab at fashion shows. At parties. On magazine covers. Comments praising them. Couple goals. Fashion royalty. Perfect match. Adimp ate to numb the pain. Chin-chin. Bread. Anything she could find. Food had always been her comfort. Now it was her only companion. Fadik comes in. Her sister Fadik finally forced her way into the room. Bimp. What is wrong with you? She shouted. You look terrible. Adimp couldn't even cry anymore. She just sat there. Empty. Fadik sat beside her. And for once, her sharp tongue softened. He wasn't worth it, she said quietly. Any man who judges you by your body doesn't deserve your heart. But I loved him, Adimp whispered. Fadik shook her head firmly. No. You loved who you thought he could become. You loved the dream. Then she said the truth that burned because it was true. He didn't love you. He loved what you could do for him. The mirror moment. That night, Adimp stood in front of her cracked mirror. And for the first time in a long time, she really looked. Swollen eyes. Puffy face. A body she had tried so hard not to hate. Now feeling like a prison. She remembered Tund's words. You were convenient. And something buried deep inside her finally woke up. Not revenge. Not anger. Clarity. She breathed out slowly. I was not convenient, she whispered. I was a blessing he was too blind to see. Her new beginning. The next morning, Adimp made a decision. Not to beg Tund back. Not to fight Zainab. Not to destroy anyone. But to rebuild herself. For herself. She booked her first therapy session. She joined a gym run by a kind trainer who focused on health, not size. She started journaling. She unfollowed Tund, Zainab, and everyone who made her feel small. And slowly, painfully, she began to heal. The transformation wasn't fast. There were days she wanted to quit. Days she stared at her gym clothes and felt ridiculous. Days she binged on Puff Puff and cried in the bathroom. But her therapist, Mrs. Okonkwo, taught her something powerful. Healing is not linear. Some days you climb. Some days you crawl. But as long as you're moving, you're winning. And Adimp started moving. Not to become thin, but to become strong. She learned her body was not her enemy. It had carried her through heartbreak, shame, and survival. Her body deserved honor, not punishment. Even food stopped being the enemy. Food was never the problem. Pain was. With the help of a nutritionist, Adimp learned to eat with intention. Not to punish her body. Not to chase anyone's approval. But to finally stop using food to numb what her heart refused to feel. The weight came off slowly. But something more important happened first. The shame lifted. One morning, 6 months after the breakup, Adimp woke up and didn't immediately think about Tund. She lay there for a moment, confused. Then she smiled. Because that was the day she knew. She was healing. Building something that was hers. Adimp made another decision. She quit working at her aunt's fabric store. She had spent too many years helping other people build their dreams. It was time to build her own. Adimp had always had an eye for design. Not just fabric. She understood color, composition, mood, storytelling. So she started small. A bridal styling business. Helping brides choose fabrics, coordinate colors, create wedding aesthetics that felt intentional and unforgettable. At first, she worked from her phone. She posted on Instagram, joined wedding planning groups, shared before and after looks, uploaded color palettes and fabric combinations. Slowly, clients came. Then more clients. Then referrals. And within a year, Adimp had built a name for herself. Not because she was thin. Not because she was loud. But because she was excellent. She moved into a small office in Yoba. Hired an assistant. Started getting featured in wedding blogs. And then one day, her phone rang with an opportunity that would change everything. The call that changed everything. "Good afternoon, Ms. Adimp," the voice said professionally. "We'd love to have you style our models for the showcase." Adimp's heart stopped. "The showcase," she repeated. "Africa Fashion Week." One of the biggest fashion events on the continent. They needed a stylist who understood both traditional and contemporary African aesthetics. Adimp almost said no. The fashion world still felt like Tund's territory. A place where she had once shrunk herself. A place where she had once been reduced to logistics. But then she remembered Mrs. Okonkwo's words. "You don't need permission to take up space." Adimp swallowed. And she said, "Yes." Africa Fashion Week. The week before the event was chaos. Coordinating fabrics. Managing models. Solving last-minute issues. Ensuring every detail was flawless. Adimp barely slept. But she didn't complain. She was too busy becoming. On the night of the showcase, she arrived early. Focused, calm, ready. She wore a stunning outfit that hugged her confidence more than her body. And people noticed. "Who is that?" "That's the lead stylist. She's gorgeous." Adimp didn't even hear the whispers. She was working. Then across the crowded room, she saw him. Tund. Standing with Zainab, smiling for cameras, shaking hands with sponsors like a man who believed the world belonged to him. Expensive suit. Designer watch. Perfectly groomed. He looked successful. But the moment his eyes landed on Adimp, everything stopped. His smile vanished. His mouth fell open. Because the woman standing across the room, commanding attention without demanding it, could not be the same Adimp he left crying. But it was. Her body had changed, yes. Stronger. Healthier. Toned. But it wasn't the weight loss that shocked him. It was her presence. She didn't shrink. She didn't apologize for existing. She glowed. Tund excused himself from Zainab and walked toward her, his heart pounding. "Bimp," he said softly. Adimp turned. Her face was calm. No anger. No longing. Just polite distance. "Tund," she replied. He swallowed hard. You look amazing." "Thank you," she said, steady. "I feel amazing." Tund nodded slowly. "I heard you're styling tonight." That's incredible." "It is," Adimp agreed. Then she shifted her clipboard. "Excuse me. I have work to do." She started to walk away. "Wait," Tund called. Adimp paused. "Can we talk after the show?" he asked. "About everything, about us." Adimp turned back slightly. Her voice was gentle, but final. "There is no us, Tund," she said. There never really was. Her moment. The show was magnificent. Adimp's styling was praised by everyone. A perfect marriage of tradition and innovation. Bold colors balanced with elegant simplicity. Modern structure blended with ancestral pride. At the end of the night, she was called on stage. And when she stepped into the spotlight, the applause was deafening. Tund watched from the audience. And something inside him began to crumble. The apology that came too late. After the event, as Adimp was leaving, she saw Tund waiting by the door. Alone. Zainab was nowhere to be seen. She left early, he said quietly. We've been struggling. Adimp didn't ask why. She didn't care. Tund's voice cracked. I made a mistake, Bimp. His eyes looked tired. I was stupid. I was shallow. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was too blind to see your worth. Adimp stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not cruelly, not proudly, but with the wisdom of someone who had walked through fire and returned whole. You didn't throw away the best thing, she said calmly. You revealed who you really are. Tund blinked. And in doing so, you gave me the greatest gift. What gift? He whispered. Adimp's voice was soft, but unshakable. You taught me that I don't need anyone to see my worth for it to exist. She stepped closer, touched his shoulder briefly. I forgive you, she said. But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward. She held his gaze. I hope you find peace, Tund. Then she smiled. I already have. And with that, she walked away. Not running. Not crying. Not looking back. Just walking forward into the life she had built from the ashes of heartbreak. 6 months later. 6 months after Africa Fashion Week. Adimp's business had tripled. She styled 3 major campaigns. Got featured in Genevieve magazine. Hired a team of 5 assistants. Her name became synonymous with excellence in bridal styling. But more than professional success, Adimp found something rarer. Peace. She no longer measured her worth by someone else's desire. She no longer apologized for taking up space. She learned to love herself loudly, unapologetically, completely. Love found her again. Love came again. Not through grand gestures, not through flashy promises, but through gentle consistency. His name was Faye, a quiet architect who loved her poetry, her laugh, and the way she commanded a room. He never once commented on her weight. He never compared her to anyone. One evening, sitting under the stars in Lekki, Faye said something that made Adimp cry happy tears. You know what I love most about you, Bimp? Adimp sniffed, smiling. What? Faye held her hand. You chose yourself. And anyone who gets to love you now is loving someone who already knows her worth. And Tund? Through the industry, Adimp heard that Tund's relationship with Zainab ended badly. His brand was struggling. He had made enemies with arrogance. But Adimp didn't celebrate his downfall. She didn't gloat. She simply remembered what elders always say. One moment of pride can destroy what took years to build. The lesson. 1 year after the fashion showcase, Adimp sat in her office, staring at the vision board she created during her darkest days. It read, I will never abandon myself again. And she had kept that promise. She learned the greatest lesson of all. The person who stays when you have nothing is worth more than gold. But the person who leaves when you gain everything teaches you something priceless. Your value was never theirs to determine. Because what you truly value at home, you don't discard when you visit a palace. Adimp wasn't perfect. She wasn't flawless. But she was whole. And that was more than enough. This is the story of Adimp. The woman who learned that the greatest love story you will ever live is the one you write with yourself. If this story touched you, If it reminded you that your worth is not determined by people who cannot see it, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's build a community of people who choose themselves. Subscribe to Tales by African Folktales for more stories that carry wisdom across generations. From the dusty villages of our ancestors to the shining cities of today. Until next time, remember, the one who knows their value does not beg for validation. This is Tales by African Folktales. Keep your culture alive. Keep your dignity sacred. And never let anyone convince you that you're too much or not enough. Because you are exactly what the world needs. ASE. So shall it be.